Om Shri Sai Ram. Welcome, students. Nice to be back here. We're going to, first of all, review A Sunny Morning, Chapter 5, before we go into When You Are Old. As you remember, in A Sunny Morning, we had a play, a 13 or 14 page play, that was done in a park in Madrid. And the two major actors were Laura and Don Gonzalo. And they were young lovers 50 years ago, and when they met in the park, they were 50 years older. And this play was written by the Quintero brothers when they were only 16 and 18 years of age. And all of the actors in the play were infatuated with other people. Petra, who was the servant of Laura, was interested in the guard. And Juanito, who was the servant of Gonzalo, was interested in all the maids that were in the park. And Laura and Gonzalo were interested in their ego memories of what they were 50 years ago. And so the play starts off with them both having to sit in the same bench, and they become friends over a pinch of snuff. 50 years ago, they both liked snuff. And then in the play here, at this time, in Madrid, they both take a pinch of snuff and they become friends sitting on the bench. And Gonzalo pulled out a book of poems and started to read. And he read these following lines. All love is sad, but sad as it is the best thing that we know. And this was a quote from Campo Amor. Gonzalo had a book of poems that he was reading from. And then he started to read another poem. He started to read the poem that says, 20 years pass. And Laura said to him, I know that poem, and you can't read it. Let me read it. And so she took the book from Gonzalo and read, 20 years pass. He returns, and each beholding the other exclaim, can it be that this is he? Heavens, is it she? And this is a foreshadowing of the play that's taking place, because they knew each other 50 years ago, and in 20 years your bodies change a lot, and that's what this quote was from the poetry book. But they see each other now, and they slowly realize that this is the person they cared about 50 years ago. So in the play, I gave you 4 questions to answer, and I'd like to go through those answers right now. Laura and Gonzalo built up stories about themselves, about how they passed away and what they did after they met each other. And why did they build these stories up for each other? And there's 3 options. A, to fool each other. B, to forget their past. Or C, to conceal their emotions. This is in comprehension number 2, so more than one answer can be correct. So A, they were fooling each other. They wanted to pretend that they were different than they really were. And so Gonzalo, who ran away with a ballet dancer to Paris 3 months after he separated from Laura, wasn't as truthful as he's trying to make out to Laura. And Laura got married 2 years later after Gonzalo left. The second one is forget the past. They're not forgetting the past, they're living in the past. And C is concealing their emotions. These people were very beautiful when they were younger. In their 20s, they had incredible beauty. In fact, Laura was known as the Silver Maiden, envied at by all. And Gonzalo was a horseback rider, and they would throw flowers to each other. So they were trying to conceal their emotions. They were emotional about how they looked at this time. The next question I've asked you to answer is, why do Donna Laura and Don Gonzalo spin fictitious stories about themselves? Obviously, it's they no longer care for the way they look. Gonzalo himself feels that he is grotesque. His face has aged so much, and he can hardly walk. He shuffles along. And the Silver Maiden has gained weight, and she doesn't look anything like she did 50 years ago. So they want to cover up their embarrassment of getting older. The next question is, bring out the feelings of Laura and Gonzalo as they leave the park. Is it different than what they felt about each other in the beginning of the play? At the beginning of the play, they each wanted to have their own park bench. And because it was a nice sunny morning, so many people were there that all the benches were taken. And the only place that Gonzalo could sit was next to Laura on her bench. And so once they had the pinch of snuff and they started talking, then they finally realized that they had known each other. Even though they did not admit it to each other, they knew each other, and they had talked before 50 years ago. It was like meeting an old friend. And then the next question is, what do you think would have happened if they had revealed their identity? This is the main crux of the play and a point for thinking about and doing some thoughts about the play and what the Quintero brothers are trying to convey to the reader. And that is to always be straightforward and truthful, to have truth, satyam, in the beginning of your relationship, and then everything falls into place. Your actions become dharmic, and you end up with real, true beauty. Many people have seen people that are older, in their 60s and 70s, and they're beautiful people. They have good physique, they have bright eyes, they exhibit a glow of beauty. And so if they had revealed their true identity to them, they could have had a very sweet conversation. Oh, this has happened in the 50 years, this has happened, it's so nice to meet you again. But they didn't. Their egos got in the way and they couldn't be honest with each other. So do you think they know who they are towards the end of the play? They knew exactly that they were the other person, that Gonzalo was Gonzalo and Laura was Laura. They knew exactly that way. And then further in lesson 5, we talk about collocations. Collocations are groups of words that are commonly used together, and they just sound right. Every language has words that sound beautiful together. For instance, a quick meal. We have a quick meal instead of a fast meal. We have fast food instead of quick food. And there's 3 collocations that are used in this play that are very important. And the first one is that to make a mess, all right? The fact is, when they weren't honest with each other, they made a mess of what could have been a beautiful, sweet gathering together after a long time. And make a mess is much better sounding than do a mess. And then they have an opportunity to get together with each other. And that's, they don't want to miss an opportunity. Whenever you find an old friend, you don't want to miss this opportunity to share stories, to share ideas, what you've learned since you've met them last. And miss an opportunity is the collocation rather than lose an opportunity. And the one final collocation that is there in this story, A Sunny Morning, is broad daylight. Interesting, they saw each other in broad daylight. They could see how the other person is aged. And even Donna Laura told Gonzalo, "It hurts me to see you using a magnifying glass and such big glasses." And so she says, "My eyesight is much better." And then she quotes the poem to him. So a broad daylight is much nicer than in bright daylight. And so Sunny Morning is a story about the bright daylight and a story about love and how time changes the love if it's not the highest form of love. And so this chapter 5 brings us to chapter 6. It's done in a nice order in your book. Chapter 6 is When You Are Old, and written by W.B. Yeats, rhymes with Gates. And the pre-reading activity, is there a difference between love and infatuation? Most of you already know that there is a big difference. Infatuation is you are attracted by a sight or a sound, and it grabs your attention. But love is a feeling that you have for something or someone from the bottom of your heart, and you care about that person or thing. So there's a big difference. Infatuation comes and goes, love stays. Do you think the perception of love changes as one gets older? Well, hopefully so. As we get older, we're supposed to get wiser. And then we bring our love from a physical, mental love, okay, into a higher spiritual love. And we love the Atma, the real being in the other person. So when you are old starts off, and it starts off with the lady reading a book of poems by the fire, all right? And this book of poems is called The Rose. And this was given to the muse or the girlfriend of W.B. Yeats in the year 1893. And this year, Yeats was 28 years old, and Maud Gonnet, who was his girlfriend, was 27 years old. And he gave her this book of poems called The Rose. And in the book of poems is this poem called When You Are Old. And it starts off, what's interesting about this poem, in 12 stanzas, it covers love and separation, rejection, and it also covers time. The Sunny Morning covered time and love in about 14 pages, but in 12 short lines, a good poet, okay, can get you to think about these deeper principles and subjects of life, of love, rejection, and time. So he starts off by saying, take this book down when you're old and gray. When you are old and gray and full of sleep and nodding by the fire, take down this book. Now, he has given this book to her in real life. In 1893, he gave her this book of poems. And slowly read and dream of the soft look your eyes once had and of their shadows. So he knew her for many years. She was an actress. She came from a rich family. He was an author. He was a poet and a playwright. In fact, he wrote so many plays and such beautiful poetry, he won the Nobel Prize in 1923, 30 years after he wrote this poem. So in the poem, you can see that she's got a fire there, and the fire represents, it's a symbol. The symbol is the love that William Butler Yeats had for Maud Gonnet, all right? But what's nice about good poetry is that it can go across not only your own personal experience, but it's good for the general experience. It's a way that people can look back at their lives, and a poet makes his poetry connect with you when he writes it and you read it and you get this aha moment. Something clicks inside of you. And that's what makes poetry so beautiful. So she takes down the book, she's reading by the fire, and she thinks about when she was 40 to 50 years younger, all right? And she's thinking about her eyes and the soft look that she had, and their shadows deep. The shadows deep is very important here, because what Yeats could do was to look into the eyes of this Maud Gonnet and could see her soul. And this was in the years right before 1893. It was the few years before that. They used to have dinner together. In fact, for one 9-day period, they had dinner every night and would talk about these beautiful things. And he would offer to marry her. He gave many proposals of marriage to Maud. But Maud came from a rich family, and she had many suitors. Many people loved her. And she did not accept this marriage proposal from Yeats. So later on in the poem, how many moments of glad grace, how many loved your moments of glad grace, and loved your beauty with love, true or false. So as he looks into her eyes, he can see what's going to happen to her. Okay? This is 1893, and he's asked to marry her, wants to take care of her, has a real deep love for her. And he can see that she is still a year younger. She's only 27. and she's being sought after. You can see how beautiful she looks, and men are looking at her, older men are looking at her, politicians are looking at her, these other actors. She was an actress. Everybody is looking at her and wanting to have some time with her. But he could see, Yeats could see that if she doesn't make the right move, okay, and choose him as a marriage partner, that the future may not be as true and as good as she likes. And he's trying to warn her with this poem. And so this is when she's very young. Next two lines are a picture of him, okay? And this is when he's young, he's 28 years old, and he's propositioning to Maud Gonnet, to marry him. And he's saying that my love for you, okay, is so true that I love the pilgrim soul in you. A pilgrimage is when a person goes towards God and they spend their whole life thinking about God and going towards the truth. And so he's saying, I can see the pilgrim soul in you. I can see the beauty. I can see the truth in you. And other people did not see the truth in you, but I saw the truth in you. And I loved the sorrows of your changing face. This is written when she was only 27 years old. She's still beautiful, but she has started to change. And he could see the change taking place in her. And he wanted to give her this poem so that she could reflect on maybe changing her future and being with him. Then later on, he goes to the future. He says, now bending down beside the glowing bars. On a fireplace, you have these metal bars. The fire gets really hot and everything starts to glow. And murmur a little sadly how love fled. So if she does not make the right choice now and marry the butler Yeats, okay, she's going to later on possibly regret it. The love will have fled by that time, meaning he is older than her. He knows that he'll probably die before her. In those years, in the late 18th century, women would outlive men by 8 to 10 years. And William Butler Yeats passed away in 1939. And Maud Gonnet passed away in 1953. She lived 14 years longer than Yeats lived. And he could see this, and he put this in this poem, in this book for her to read in the future. So this is interesting that his love will have fled by that time. And she'll look into the fire, and this fire represents his love. And then this love, which is gone away, is paced upon the mountains overhead and hid his face amid a crowd of stars, okay? So this is very interesting. These are called symbols, all right? The fire is a symbol of the fiery love that she rejected from Yeats. The mountain overhead and the crowd of stars are also symbols. They're symbols of higher truth, okay? And she knows that these are there. She knows the mountaintops are there. She knows that the stars and the heavens are there, but she cannot reach them at this point. She's crouched down by the fire and thinking about what she has missed. So the beauty of poetry is that in these 12 lines, he has shown you love, rejection, and what time does to you. Time, aging, and loss of beauty affect your life. It shows the catastrophic onslaught of time. She's just sleepy and no more life is in her. And she's looking back over her life. And then there's the personification. Love paced among the mountains, okay, overhead. Love is personified as a human. The human is leaving to go to the mountains, okay? And this is a personification that's used in many poems. So Yeats says, all right, that his love is of the kind that is rare and not simply understood and not easy or not certain. His love is the real love. It's the one that it's very rare to find. And and would only happen if you had the most purest of intentions and had the truth, you lived the truth, and you had dharmic action, you lived righteously, and then you would have the beauty of true love. And you can see the picture here. This is Yeats, okay? He's on the mountaintop. And he has left left Maud Gonay. She didn't accept his proposals, okay? But he is left to find a higher truth. So what I would like you to do, now that we've read the poem, okay, is to answer a couple of questions, okay? The question I want you to answer is, how is the one man, Yeats, different from the many others who loved the lady? That's the first question I'm asking you to answer, okay? The second question is, does the poem bring out the transient nature of beauty as against the permanence of love? So you can see that Yeats loved this Gonay with a true love that lasted all of his life. And the other people that loved her may not have loved her all of her life. So please write a paragraph on that question. And then the third question is comment on the usage of time frame by the poet. All right? The time frame, of course, is the youth that they had together when he was 28 and she was 27, and what happens later on, as she gets older and is by the fire. And then, When You Are Old is a poem of contrast. What purpose do they serve? And I'll show you three of the contrasts, and then you answer what purpose they serve. The contrasts are young age versus old age, okay? We have the poem given to Maud Gonay when she's young. But when she's old is when she's reading the poem. We have that contrast. We have true love versus false love, or true love versus infatuation. And then we have happy versus sad. These are the contrasts that Yeats used in the poem to get you to think of these deeper thoughts. And so please finish these up for the next class, and we will go through the answers at that time. Om Sarah.